Welcome to the Strong for Performance podcast, where we give coaches and consultants practical ideas for taking you to the next level in your business and in your life. I'm your host, Meredith Bell. I interview experts who've walked in your shoes and offer real-world experience that you can apply to your own journey. Welcome to another episode of the Strong for Performance podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and today I am very pleased to introduce as my guest, Larry Indiviglia. Larry, welcome to my show.
Meredith, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our connection, and thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing with your podcast and so many other things that you do to serve and support and help others. It's very, very inspiring.
Well, thank you, Larry. One of the things I wanted to say before I go into your more formal introduction is that this is going to be a unique conversation. I've never had a guest on my show where we're going to talk about love, commitment, death. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation, and you'll know why I invited Larry as we get into our conversation. I do want to give a shout out to my colleague, long-term colleague, Elizabeth Freed, because Elizabeth is the one who introduced us. Larry Indiviglia is president of INDsightsForLife, Inc., a fitness professional, a presenter, an author, and a business and life coach for the Todd Durkin Mastermind Program. He's also a retired Naval Reserve officer. Thank you for your service, Larry. And a graduate of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. Larry has 2 advanced degrees, a master's in corporate fitness administration and an MBA from the University of San Diego. Larry's work of over a 30-year fitness career has inspired, motivated, and encouraged people to grow and do their best. He has a powerful ability to connect with people, and he helps them transform their lives and businesses. And Larry recently published a very special book called 126 Days, 11 Minutes, Our Love Story, to honor the life of Gail, a woman who courageously chose to embrace life and love while battling stage 4 cancer. Although it was brief, Larry considers his relationship with Gail as one of the most profound experiences of his life. He also hopes his book inspires others to say yes to love, even when logic says no. So, Larry, with that introduction, talk a little bit more about your book and why you felt compelled to write it.
The book, 126 Days, 11 Minutes, Our Love Story, it's a true story of 2 actively aging seniors in their 60s, yes, in their 60s, who met online and made that choice to do so, and fell madly in love, perhaps against all odds, because one of them, Gail in this case, was suffering from and battling stage 4 breast cancer. And in our open and authentic relationship, we lived in the today, not in the yesterdays or the tomorrows. And we found strength and compassion and passion and an alignment mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And ultimately, I learned, and perhaps Gail learned, that to love with loss is possible, Meredith, and worthwhile, rather than never to have loved at all. I never set out when I meet Gail to write a book about her or our love story. It evolved, perhaps because the story and the length of our relationship was only 126 days and 11 minutes. But I learned so much from the relationship, so much from this special woman, and many, many lessons that I wanted to honor her life and the many others who suffer from breast cancer or stage 4 cancers. Their lives matter, their lives make a difference, and certainly Gail's did in mine. And I really wanted to pass those lessons on to the world. Not only how they impacted my life, but how they can continue to learn from Gail's light and how she approached and embraced life and love to the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was just so inspiring. And, I kind of hated to get to the end of it because I was afraid I would be getting upset. But the way that you wrote about her approaching death and how you handled that was just really beautifully done. And I want to acknowledge you for doing that. But before we go into that part, I want to roll back the clock to the beginning of 2020, because you had shared with me in an earlier conversation that you had set an intention.
Yes.
Around love. So would you talk about those 10 forms of wealth that you mentioned and the aspect of love?
Absolutely. In my coaching walk, in my coaching profession with the Todd Durkin Mastermind Program, which has been 13 years now, we do an exercise, Meredith, and for all your listeners, called 10 Forms of Wealth. And you evaluate on a scale of 0 to 10. 0, I experienced none of this in my life, and 10, it can't get any better, the various aspects of your life, your financial, your physical, your spiritual, the legacy you're leaving, your sense of adventure, your career, etc., all through 10. And one of the wealth areas is love. So I made a conscious choice that I had to improve that area. I think I was scoring myself a 2, very much lacking in my life. And I had had a couple of relationships since being divorced for 9 years after a 25-year marriage. And I did consciously make that choice, and I wanted to meet somebody. So January was the new year, the new decade. So I put myself out there on an online dating site, and in the quest to find somebody who hopefully is looking to also meet somebody. And so I think that the lesson there was the power of choosing rather than chance. Was it a chance meeting with Gail? Well, if we hadn't both chosen to go online and perhaps set the intention like I did, I can't necessarily speak for her if she did a 10 Forms of Wealth, but she decided also to go online. And then we were able to have a chance encounter by the choice and intention we made. Yeah.
I really like that distinction that you're making there between choice and chance, because it ties in with another area I wanted to get into with you, which is around risk. Because I have pondered how many people would have chosen to continue that relationship with her when they learned about the fact that she was in the stage 4 with a battle against breast cancer. And yet you went in with your eyes wide open. You chose that. Talk a little bit about how you evaluated the risk. And before you do, I just want to encourage my listeners to open their minds about different areas of their lives where there's a risk involved, whether it's related to their business or their personal lives, because I think that it's important to look at how do we look at risk and how do we go about evaluating it so we make a choice that serves us.
Yes, Meredith, and very insightful question about risk. I think in backing up just one, the choice Gail did make was, even under stage 4 cancer, was to embrace love and life, even in the shadow of cancer. That was a powerful choice. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, she went online to meet somebody, but she made that choice that she was not going to be a victim or live in a cave and have cancer run her life and define her. So that was a powerful choice she made, gave her the chance to meet me, which we did connect. Now, when I met Gail, I was very captivated by her courage and her honesty. That was number one. So I said, I see a greatness and something special in this lady. And in the past, I've done that in my life, and that helps me govern risk, or look at the issue of risk and say, well, wait a minute. Okay, this is not just looking for a return on investment of time, energy, and money, but what value now? What's the value of my investment of time, energy, and money, and so many other things? What am I going to get from this experience? And the other part was, since it was a love relationship, I followed my heart. I like to say the heart has no questions, and when you really tap into it. But the courage that she had in being so honest, I didn't think about, well, she's going to die tomorrow. She's going to die in 2 weeks. I really didn't think about that. I looked at how I need to discover more about this woman, how the experience somehow was going to help not only me in receiving her gifts, but help her in this stage of her life. And I believe that my overall purpose, my overall feelings were to align with somebody spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And I felt that with Gail. So the risk of future loss, or the risk of anything else that may happen, that's part of life. It's that duality, Meredith. Mm-hmm. You know, we can never have absence of sorrow, or absence of fear, or absence of pain. We have some of that in life, but we also have great joy and strength. And I think duality of life that's life. Okay, so I'm entering into this relationship. Is there some risk? Perhaps, but I looked at it as there was going to be so much more gain in the discovery of this person and how courageous she was. And obviously I was captivated by her inner and outer beauty. So that was kind of how I was negotiating that, or not even negotiating, how I went into it with those feelings that were very, very strong, and trusting the heart.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. And just thinking about how you interacted with each other through your texts and in your messages, and when you were in person, the desire to affirm each other, I think, was very powerful. I sensed a real uplifting of each other. And that to me was really a significant lesson, because one of the things I actually wrote in my review of your book on Amazon was this idea of, it inspired me to be a better person in all of my relationships, because of the way that you focused on the present moment when you were together, or even apart, messaging each other in a positive, affirming way. And too often, I think we can get hung up on the negatives we see in someone else, and wishing they were different, or wishing they would do this or say that, or, and so it was very refreshing to see a relationship. And I guess part of it could have been guided by this recognition that we don't know how much time we have. And so we're going to make the most of it. And of course, the truth is, none of us knows how much time we have. But I'd love to hear how that played into the way you all approached each day as a precious moment.
Yes. And it's interesting, I think, the origins of that. My coaching experience as a life and business coach for 13 years, I always have a goal, Meredith, after a session, whether it's a Zoom call, whether it's an email exchange, to make that person, he or she, feel better at the end of the exchange. Okay? Maybe they have clarity, or have a better sense of clarity. They feel better about themselves and their ability to solve a problem or to move forward. Mm-hmm. Because we know as coaches, you can't really tell people what to do, but you can ask them questions, because the person closest to the problem may have the answer. So the listening skill that I had as a coach, I always listened to what Gail said, what she wrote, what she said. And that was important for me to bring in to the relationship and how I communicated with her. Always make her feel better. It's interesting. My late dad, who lived to 99, he always told me, when you go out on a date with a girl or a woman, make sure she has a better time than you do. And it was something I always remembered, to make sure she has a better time than I do. So that goes back to one other dynamic between Gail and I. And this is important. Gail was an Argentinian tango dancer. She, and in that dance, the male leads and the female responds. She doesn't mindlessly follow. She responds. And that's leadership in and of itself. If a man performs a good lead, a nurturing, loving, romantic, supportive, enthusiastic dialogue and affirmation of words and actions, the woman will respond in kind. So we felt we had that. Our relationship was like a dance. Gail said that many times, but she brought her experience with tango dancing, the power of the embrace, and how intimate it was, to how we talked to each other, how I led, and how she also responded. But I always have a thing. The word think before you say something. Think, is it true? H, is it helpful? I, is it inspiring? N, is it necessary? Because a lot of times it's not. Some things left unsaid are okay. And K, is it kind? And I believe Gail and I both had that. We had a great love for each other. But we kind of used that approach in keeping each day special as the gift it was. And as I brought it back to the book, I did the book by days, as you know, day 1 through 126. Each day had a title. Each day was a special gift. And we embellished that gift by our verbal and other exchanges. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thinking about the skill that you mentioned that you brought to bear in the relationship, what are some of the other coaching skills or strengths that you've developed over the years that ended up being important during the times that she was feeling well and you could do things together, but also when she was in the hospice environment and what you were required, not really required, what you needed to do, you felt, to really serve her best? What kind of skills did you have to draw forth?
I mentioned one already, and it's worth to repeat, is listening. Okay, because listening to a loved one, especially who's under challenge or might be in pain, mental, emotional pain. Gail wasn't in physical pain so much to the end because hospice did a wonderful job in controlling that. But listening is important, what their needs are. Yes, we do have needs as a caregiver, but listening is a key thing that I've learned to develop more and more of as a coach. Also, empathy. As coaches, business coach, life coach, we're able to be empathetic because we've walked that walk as many of the people we coach. Now, I have not died before. I have not been on my deathbed. I have seen close relatives. I have seen others in that environment, but I never lost a soulmate or a loved one, a spouse, a lover, a partner in that. So I had to go in there with best practices. As a coach, we have to take care of ourselves first, best practices, our own meditation, our own spiritual and physical best practices, so we can be strong and we could also be able to contribute to that person's experience in a positive way. So empathy and best practices as a coach. I think finally too, and Meredith, and your coaching experience, and perhaps some of your listeners, is over the years, intuition. Being able to read a person. You could tell you cannot treat every person we coach the same way. Certain tenets and templates and approaches do work, but each person is different. And intuition and be able to read that person's signals is very, very important. In my times of joy with Gail, I more and more were able to read her signals things she said, things she touched, things she did, and how that was always went back to her truth and core values. Those are some of the things I brought to the table in the relationship with Gail, and especially towards the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the other things that I pulled away, especially as you were trying to be so supportive of her, visiting her often, and really giving a lot of your energy to her, it was important for you to also have a support system. And I
Yes.
would like for you to talk about that, because I know my listeners, especially during this time of the pandemic, have each had their own sets of challenges, whether it's related to their business or some other personal crisis they may be going through. Talk about why a support system is so important and how your support system of individuals served you during this time.
Wow. Wonderful point. And we rarely in life get there alone. You know, Meredith, I'm sure in your walk you realize that, many of your listeners. And when you're in a very challenging environment, in a case you're being a caregiver, you need to reach out to people and make sure they know that. Okay. And then some people may reach out to you just as a matter of course anyway, because they know you and perhaps are a friend to you, and they maybe were not aware. It's important for you not to hide that. And I had some people reach out to me, some by pure intuition, that they felt they hadn't talked to me in a while and needed to reach out. And a man in Arizona, David Jack, came into my life who I've been friends with, just had some intuition that he hadn't talked to me in a while. That will happen. But your sphere of influence, your circle of influence, the 5 people that you surround yourself with, they need to know what you're going through. And they will check in with you. My great friend Todd Durkin checked in with me, regularly. He's mentioned in the book. And then, and I'll try not to get emotional here, some of the real solid friends from years and years, and Colonel Hank Donegan, and I mentioned Hank in the book, that I knew from the Naval Academy, a friend of 47 years, has been through multiple battlefields and his 30-year career as a Marine officer. He was instrumental in reaching out to me. And so there's a reliance on, if you're able to be vulnerable and you maintain that communication, they will rally for you. And sometimes when you least expect it. And I share a few of those stories in the book. Mm-hmm. And they were all instrumental in encouraging me and also, praying for me, as part of their faith and as part of being, truly authentic to who they are. That was my experience. And I will say this, the hospice, sharp hospice care, and the angels that work there, from social workers to spiritual counselors, to musical therapists, to the nurses and assistants and home care people, were outstanding in all respects and also helped me and listened to me. So it was a team effort, truly, in getting Gail to her transition point.
Mm-hmm. I just think that's so vital, and thank you for sharing that, because I think many times when we're going through a tough time, there's this struggle of appearances, wanting to appear to be holding it all together, and not burdening other people. Those of us that love to be of help to others and serve others, it's sometimes hard to ask for help for ourselves. Yes. And not want to, put somebody out. But in a situation like this, it just is really critical to your own well-being, right? To have those kind of people in your corner.
It absolutely was, Meredith, because, there's that famous, I don't know if it's a famous quote, Audrey Hepburn, who was a great humanitarian as well as a performer, international star. She said, you have 2 hands. One is for helping yourself, and then the other is to help another. And you do have to help yourself in many ways first before you could really fully extend to another. And you're right, spiritually, physically, best practices like I've mentioned, and also the embrace of others. You could sit down there and say, I'm having a tough time today. What would you do? or I'm doing this, what do you think about that? And that's important, you know, sounding board, and to know you're not alone. And I think that's the important, not alone as a caregiver, and then not certainly the person who's transitioning, not alone in dying in the last stage of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, this thing of taking care of yourself reminds me of a phrase that you use that I just love. So I wanted to ask you about it. This was for
Sure.
day 114, where you talked about creating a shield of serenity. I just love that phrase. When you're surrounded by a serious or life-threatening challenge. So talk a little bit about that, why it's important, what does it mean, and what do you do with it?
I think the Shield of Serenity did come from Colonel Hank, who I just mentioned here a couple of minutes ago, and Hank has had the ability during his many wartime experiences, unfortunately, but he found himself in battles throughout the world in his 30-year Marine Corps career, that in this chaos, somehow you find a shield of serenity for yourself. Because there is a reaction to things and a response to things, but somehow you have to remain serene within your core, within your being. Because if you don't, you will lose it. So he felt a shield of serenity was always important in the midst of challenge, chaos, and in some cases trauma, or even if your life's at risk, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So is it the fight or flight mechanism? It's probably, it's not the flight, but it's the fight, but it's being able to fight because of that. He also recommended, and Gail had said this to me, I was trying to find my peace and to say things to her. I didn't want to wait to the end. I wanted to make sure she was aware of what I felt about her. Well, at some point she couldn't talk anymore, but when she could, I asked her, and she said, Larry, you can't give me peace. You can't find me peace. I have to find that for myself. And I found that if I was uneasy, maybe that would not be as easy for her to achieve mentally and emotionally. Colonel Hank told me, Larry, find your own peace first. Develop that shield of serenity, whatever it is. So when you go into Gail's room, she will not feel that you're uptight, that you're excited, that you're overly worried, that you're there to be present, and that you have found the peace in this process. And if you bring that to the room, she will be more able to find her own peace. He was 100% right about that, because I think ultimately she did, Meredith. But again, that was the importance of that point. And thank you for bringing that up, because sometimes it can get lost in so many things in the book. And that was a key point. And again, by a dear, dear friend who had a lot of life experience and who found a way to find peace in the midst of chaos on the battlefields of the world. Yeah.
Well, I think it resonated so much with me, because what you just said about what you felt yourself, you brought into the room with her. That happens so much in all of our interactions with others. When we have an agitated mind, or we're in an agitated state, and we bring that in to the person we're speaking with, I'm especially thinking of people we've had issues with, where we've had conflicts in the past. And if we're anticipating that's what it's going to be when we go in to have a conversation with them, it's like they can pick that up, and it leads to more conflict. You did the opposite. You found that calmness and peace. And when you were able to bring that into the room for Gail, she sensed that.
She did. She did. And I think it's like maybe in leadership, which many of your listeners, whether it's a leading situation in a business, a corporation, an important position, or leader without a title, Robin Sharma, in your own way. Leader, you don't have to have a title to be a leader,
right?
But how you carry yourself, and especially if you are a leader who's leading men and women and in an organization, whatever, they do look at you to see how you respond and how you behave and
Mm-hmm.
how you carry yourself. I think that's very important, and that builds trust and respect.
Mm-hmm.
Then they are more apt to trust you, to be accountable to you, and quote, to follow or at least deliver your mission and what you're doing, how you carry yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
the best practices do come in then, right? We have to continue.
Well, they do. And I think that's the key, is how can we apply things that we've learned in one situation? And I think of all of your years of experience in the military yourself, and then in these last 13 years as a business and life coach, and what you were able to draw on in order to serve this wonderful woman who had come into your life. I just think you were a gift to her, and she was a gift to you in different ways. And I'd love for you to talk about, how was she a gift for you? What are some of the things you took away from that whole process, the relationship, going through her death, the grieving and recovery afterwards? Because it's been pretty recent. That was just in May, right?
Yeah, it was recent. May 12th is when Gail transitioned, and I knew her for a little over 4 months. One of the things I learned from Gail, Gail was a brilliant woman. She went to USC. She was fluent in French and Russian. She was a photographer for 33 years, a professional photographer in the Los Angeles area. I had published 3 books on photography: Soul to Soul, about mixed couples, Tango Amor, which was a dance book with tango, and then also Barely Here, which was models in nature. But in any case, what I learned from Gail was to be able to stand in your truth. And she would say that many times, Larry. She says, as long as I stick to my core values, and she would say, standing in my truth, in being my own advocate, going through this 4+ years of cancer treatment, what works, what doesn't work. That also included alternative treatments, by the way. She was truthful to herself, and she felt truthfully, if I could boost my immune system, that would help keep some of the cancer I have at bay. She believed that. And that was a truth of hers, a cardinal truth. So standing in your truth to the end, and she did. She always stood in her truth. So everything you say, everything you do, everything you touch, be truthful to yourself and what you're about. The other thing I learned from Gail was the ability to see people not just superficially, but deeper. And I think that came from her photographer's eye. Anytime she would meet somebody, Meredith, she would always get into the story of the person. Oh, how long did you dance? Or something like that. Like she had an intuition, and she would validate that and talk about a person, even in the hospital. She would always ask people personal questions. She would not do a photography shoot unless she was connected to the person, because she felt that would then impact the energy she would bring in. So the looking for the depth of spirit and the breadth of soul of a person, Gail was beautiful in doing that. The other thing was courage. In the face of cancer, not being a victim of the disease. Don't let that define you, who you are, and to do what you can do in life, and don't worry about what other people are saying. Continue to live, continue to embrace life and love, even during extreme circumstances. Getting back to that duality. You have to deal with it. I'm not happy with elements of this treatment. I'll deal with it though, and I'm going to continue to live. Probably a final thing is the lyrics she always would sing to me from the Nat King Cole song, Nature Boy. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Most importantly, Meredith, as coaches, yourself, your listeners, myself, we could give a lot. Give, and give. Love. to complete the relationship, you must receive. I learned to receive love more from Gail than anybody that I had ever had a relationship with. I was able to learn that, and that is important to do.
Mm-hmm.
And because when you receive it, it makes the giving even more nourishing, but it's a completeness. It's almost like getting back to the dance. There's dance steps you have to flow. It's not just individual. You have to be together. So those were the things that I learned from Gail, and humor. She had a great sense of humor as well. There could be many others, but those were the major things I learned. Yeah.
That's great. So in wrapping up, a final question I have for you is, what impact has that had on going forward with other relationships, whether it's a loving relationship, a romantic relationship, or just relationships with anyone else?
Yeah, Gail was a catalyst for me, Meredith, and thank you for asking. She broke my heart open. She didn't break my heart, certainly great loss, yes, but she broke my heart open that down the road, and she told me, Larry, promise me you'll love again. I don't want you moping around. You're 65, so you don't have a long time necessarily to wait. So I don't want you to mope around. I want you to love again. And you know, Meredith, I'm going to read this, and it's not very long, okay? And this is what she wrote me. It wasn't at the very end, but she knew that our days were numbered. I hope you find someone who never makes you question your own self-worth. I hope you find someone who cherishes your happiness as much as their own. I hope you find someone who supports you in the things you are passionate about. I hope you find someone whom you can laugh with and sit in silence with and share your deepest secrets with. I hope you find someone who is your lover, your partner, and your friend. I hope you find someone who treats you as their equal, who learns and grows with you and beside you. I hope you find someone who appreciates all the tiny details that make up who you are. I hope you find someone who respects your heart, your family, and your values. I hope you find someone who reminds you that you deserve the love you give. That's very, very profound. And for
That
somebody,
is. I would think anyone who's a parent would want that for their kids.
Yeah. And, you know, she sent that to me. I didn't put it in the book, but that was, you know, probably about 3 full weeks or so, 4 weeks before she passed and transitioned. So I was given my, I don't want to say marching orders, but good vibes, you know, in moving forward. And I have met somebody in the process of the book adventure. Actually, before that, I think was all a part of it. That has been a very important part of my life. And we're probably actually talking here because of it, because of her. So, you know, Elizabeth has been wonderful. And Gail permitted me to move forward on my journey because of this support and the encouragement she gave me, certainly towards the end, yeah.
Well, that is such a beautiful quote. I'm so glad you shared that, because it shows her beautiful spirit. And we're really honoring her with this podcast episode. And to have you share that at the end, to me, is just very profound, because it demonstrates how much she loves you and how much she wanted for your happiness, which is what, when you think about it, we really, when we have the maturity, the emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it, the awareness to love someone so much that we want the best for them. And she was, was able to articulate that so beautifully. Thank you so much.
She was a deep person. She was very, you know, high IQ, high EQ. And sometimes you don't always find that in a person. They could be very, very high intelligence and emotionally maybe not. But she did have both. And, you know, I'm just very I feel very blessed that, you know, I have a strong faith. God sometimes brings people together for a reason, you know, in your life, and, and that connection. And sometimes it lasts a long, long time, sometimes not as long a period of time. But there's a reason for each one. But we have the power with choice to do that. And I would encourage everybody listening that if you have some trepidation or fear about loving somebody who's struggling, and it doesn't have to be a life and death situation like it was with Gail, nor cancer, don't be afraid, you know, because if you take the jump and you get in there and you make that choice, you might find you're going to experience something you never thought possible. Certainly Gail and I did. Yeah.
That's great. So Larry, how can people connect with you and get a copy of your book and learn more about what you do?
Sure. The best way to get the book right now, 126 Days, 11 Minutes, Our Love Story, on Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback version. Secondly, we'll be coming out with the audio version, I'm hoping before the end of the year. I think we're going to be able to get it done. And that will be on Audible via the Amazon channel. Amazon also owns Audible. They own a lot of things, but those are the channels to get the book. As far as for me, if you want to follow me on Facebook, is at Lawrence Indiviglia. I know that is a big name, but at Lawrence Indiviglia. You could find me on Twitter at Larry INDsights, I-N-D sites. Okay, Larry Insights, Insight, not with an S, Larry Insight on Twitter. And then also I am on LinkedIn. If you just go and search my name, I'm on LinkedIn under Larry Indiviglia or even Lawrence. Both names will come up. And those are the channels that you could reach me. If you want to email me directly, lindiviglia@gmail.com, lindiviglia@gmail.com. And those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And I'm very excited about the book and the lessons that people could learn. We've gotten a good response, and certainly appreciate all your support for the book, Meredith, and all the wonderful work you're doing.
Well, thank you, Larry, and thank you so much for being my guest. We'll have all of those links on the show notes page when we publish your episode. So thank you, and continue doing the fabulous work that you're doing in the world, because you bring a lot of light and love to the people that you interact with. And I just think your life has even been more enriched by what you and Gail experienced together. And I just love how you're bringing that out to the world now, so more people can learn from that and benefit.
Thank you, Meredith. Much apprecited. And I think Gail's smiling today, you know, looking down and saying, man, he got my picture of the Argentine tango Malanga on the front cover. So I think she's happy about that.
That's great. Well, thanks again, Larry.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strong for Performance podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com to learn how our tools can increase your impact with clients and expand your business. And while you're there, grab our free ebook, The 5 Secrets to Getting Better at Anything. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell. Make it a great day.